Okay, good morning. In the last class, we were discussing about a phenomenon called priority inversion. We were showing a scenario where there are three tasks, say T1 having a higher priority than T2 and T2 having a higher priority than T3. And the scenario is this, that T3 starts first, all right, and then performs a critical section entry at this point. So, suppose this is the critical section in which in which T3 is working on. Now, at some point here, while this is working, T2 comes in. So, this one is preempted, right. So, T2 starts from this point. Okay, T2 arrives here. So, T2 starts from this point and goes for a while, when we find that T1 is arriving. T1 arrives at this point. Okay. And while T1 is arriving, T1 makes a request for the same resource that is held by T3, which is a lower priority task. And so, this one actually cannot proceed any further, it is blocked here, it is not being able to proceed. All right. So, who will continue? Now, this one, therefore, then the priority will come down to the next one, that means T2, T2 will continue for quite some time, and when T2, because T2 is having the priority next to T1. So, when T1 halts, then T2 will continue, and when T2 ends here, suppose T2 ends here, then also T1 cannot resume, although it is higher priority, because the critical section is already entered by T3. Therefore, T3, as long as T3 is not releasing the resource, T1 cannot get in. So, T3 starts from here. The T3 actually executes the critical section from here, and when it ends the critical section, then only T1, which was waiting for. So, here T3 performs the release through the Vs signal, then only from here this one can enter its critical section. All right. So, you see, during so much time, you can see T1 was blocked, and T1 was mostly blocked by tasks having lower priority. So, here this is T2 was blocking T1, and here T3 blocks T1. Therefore, although T1 was having priority higher than T2 and T3, because of this scenario, the priority has been inverted. T3 was having higher priority than T1, and similarly T2 was having higher priority than T1. So, this is known as priority inversion. All right. Unintentionally, it was not intentional, not intended, but the priority got changed. So, one anecdote that we were discussing was that of the Mars the pathfinder that went to Mars. And there I was talking about that there were 3 tasks. One was the high priority task, of some communication or shared memory access, say. This was being done by the different components of the Mars system. The second one was the communication okay. I am not too sure, I think it was communication with the earth station or something like that. Maybe with some controller. And the third was data acquisition from Mars. All right. So, these were the 3 tasks. Now, it was somehow happening that it was found that there is a system reset that is taking place at different point. I mean intermittently the system is getting reset. So, all the data that was acquired is being lost and all those. So, ultimately what was found is that while the data acquisition was going on somehow just like this, if we assume just like this, the data acquisition was going on, and during that time the higher priority task, because of some interrupt came and the communication task started. In this diagram, I have drawn it a little. This part you should not consider. All right, the T2 starts from here. T2 starts from here. I inadvertently had drawn this line. So, this line is not there. Okay. T2 just started from here. So, somehow there was an interrupt and it went in, and consequently the higher priority task that was on, highest priority task, that is a shared resource, was being delayed for a long time than that is expected. Since this task is being delayed beyond the time that is expected, there was a watchdog timer and you know what watchdog timers do, that keep on watching for some regular events, and when that does not happen, that raise an alarm signal. So, this watchdog timer found that this high priority task is not being active for a long time. So, there must be something wrong, and it was resetting the system. And therefore, because of this resetting, which was not intended by design, the data acquisition was being affected. All right, time and again the data loss was occurring. So, what is the way, and this whole thing was happening because of the priority inversion phenomenon. So, what is the way out of priority inversion? The way out from priority inversion is the priority inheritance protocol. And what is that? One option, even before that, I can solve this problem by disallowing interrupt. Say I wait for a second for this before I give the priority inheritance protocol. I can solve this. One way to solve this the priority inversion problem would be by disallowing preemption. During the operation, during the execution of critical sections. All right. So, as a result, what can happen if I just keep this case in view? So, T3 starts and makes a request to enter a critical section here. So, let us do that. T3 starts from this point, makes a PS, here, PS request here, and enters the critical section. Now, earlier what happened is T2 arrived at some intermediate point, but here what I am saying is the P2, say P2 has arrived here, T2 has arrived here, again I am drawing this by inertia. All right. So, T2 has arrived at some point here, T2 has arrived, but I am not allowing this to start, I am not allowing this to preempt T2 and T3, and instead I am carrying on T3 till T3 completes and performs a Vs at this point. Right. Now, at this point maybe T1 has again arrived, T1 has arrived at some point like this. Now, obviously, T1 has got higher priority than T2. So, when it performs the Vs at this point, T1 will resume, right, T1 will resume here. In that way, I can reduce the extent to which T1 was delayed earlier or blocked, because T1 has arrived here and we expect this critical section to be not that big. But one problem with this, that since I am now here, say T1, this T1 was not actually asking for S, might be. It was not interested in the shared resource, but because of my principle that I will not allow preemption during the execution of the critical section, this was blocked, although it was not interested in the resource. So, that is one disadvantage of taking the measure of disallowing the interrupts. Okay. Now, next I come to the priority inversion protocol, priority inheritance protocol. Here the rules are, please note carefully, that the tasks are scheduled according to their priorities. All right. If task T1 executes say PS, that means when I write, if task T1, let me write it clearly, this is not being very clear. When I write if T1 executes PS, what does it mean? That there is some resource, shared resource, which is being accessed by T1 through the semaphore S, through this gate S, all right. So, if T1 executes PS and already say exclusive access, if already T2 has acquired the corresponding resource, T1 is blocked, right. That means, if T1 is trying, but before that already Mr. T2 is already here, is executing this. Therefore, T1 is blocked. Now, if here priority of T2 is less than priority of T1, if that is the case, then if priority of T2 is less than priority of T1, then actually what happened in this case? T2 has inherited the priority of T1, isn't it? Because T1 is having higher priority than T2, but since T2 is here, T1 is being blocked. Therefore, T2 is inheriting the priority of T1, all right. So, T2 now, according to our preemption, according to our preemptive policy, T2 was being preempted, but then we stop a while and see that okay, T2 already acquired S. Therefore, let T2 inherit the priority of T1 and T2 resumes, implies that T2 will resume and T1 will remain blocked. Okay. So, the rule is that the tasks that inherit the highest priority of the tasks that are blocked by it. So, T2 is blocking the highest priority task that T2 is blocking is T1. Therefore, T2 gets the priority of T1, all right. Now, when T2 performs Vs, that means T2 is coming out from here by doing Vs, T2 is coming out, right. Priority of T2 is reduced or decreased to the highest priority of the tasks blocked by it. All right. If no other tasks are blocked by T2, then if no task, no such task is there, then priority of T2 is the original priority. The original priority of T2. Now, if T2 blocks T1 and T1 blocks T0, then T2 inherits the priority of T0. Okay. Suppose now, so is it clear? We will give an example, it will be clear. Now, it is this property is transitive in the sense this inheritance is a transitive property, because if T2 blocks T1 and T1 blocks T0, then T2 will inherit priority of T0, because T0 was the highest priority task. Okay. Now, with this we will come back to this with an example and see how it works. Say we come back to our earlier example. So, I have got T3 starting here, and after a while it performs PS. So, some shared resource is here that has been acquired by T3. So, T3 has performed PS and has got in, right. So, at this point T3 is performing the critical section. Now, at this point T2 arrives, all right. So, according to normal preemption, there is no conflict over the critical section. So, T2 will start, T2 is started, right. Now, at this point T1 arrives, does something and executes a PS, right. Now, what happens? This goes to sleep. Now, the question comes, if T1 executes PS and already T2 has acquired the corresponding resource, T1 is blocked and T2 inherits the priority of T1. Now, what will happen? Which task is blocking S? T3. Therefore, T3 will inherit the priority of this and will start executing its resume executing its critical section from here. So, at this point T3 inherits priority of T1, all right. So, now it completes, performs a VS here, and then what will happen? Immediately this one T1 will get back its priority, because T3 actually pushed out T1 because of inheriting the higher priority. So, this one will resume, does the it was waiting for the critical section and does something and does VS here, and after that T2 will continue, all right. T2 will then continue. T2 was waiting here because T2 preempted T3. You see, T2 is preempting T3, right, but something happened here because T1 again T1 preempted T2. Now, T1 is contending for a resource which is already grabbed by T3. Therefore, T3 is inheriting the priority of T1 and completing and releasing the resource first. releasing the resource, look at it from this angle, it is releasing the resource to the highest priority task that is asking for it. I know that you are a highest priority person, so let me finish off my task and quickly hand it over to you. That is what is happening here, and therefore, this highest priority task is being delayed less and it's completing, and this one is continuing. So, by this is the priority inheritance protocol. Now, what happened in the Mars story is somehow when it was sent to Mars, the priority inheritance bit was set to 0. So, priority inheritance was not working. So, priority inversion was taking place. So, from the Earth station they set the bit to 1, and after that the problem was solved. So, you see that all these things that we are discussing are not merely academic, all right, they had real life and very costly consequences. Now, we can have some nested, let us look at nesting of the critical sections. So, you will see here I am depicting a situation where T3 starts, and here T3 requests for some resource A, all right, starts accessing A. At this point it is asking for another resource B. It gets B for a while, but please note that it has not released A. Nesting, while it was in a critical section, it is asking for another critical section, and at this point T2, at this point T2 arrives and T2 starts execution, and here T2 asks for B, but B cannot be granted here because it is captured by this. Therefore, at this point what will happen? A priority inheritance will take place. How? T2 is of higher priority than T3, although I did not mention it in this example. So, the priorities are like this, T1 greater than T2 is greater than T3. So, this is having the higher priority than this, but this will inherit that priority and complete T3 first. T3, although this was having higher priority, it was asked to wait and let it complete by inheritance, and here while this was being executed, T1 appears here, T1 appears somewhere here. Now, T1 again executes and asks for PA. Now, what will happen? Now, it has not yet completed, but here there is a request for PA. So, who will have the highest priority now? T3 only. T3 will have the highest priority. So, T3 will first complete this part, B part, then will complete the A part. So, after this, at this point it does VB, but although it does VB here, this cannot preempt. Why not? Because the priority of T3 is that of T1 and T1 is of higher priority. I repeat, although it is VB here and T2 was waiting for B, but still it cannot get this, because by this time the priority of T3 is that of T1, because T1 is having the higher priority than T2. So, it completes this A part, does VA, and then at this point T1 will complete this A part, and then whatever it does, and when it completes this A part, when it completes the whole thing, then only T2 can start. Okay. So, if I just plot here, say what happens to the priorities, say I say priority values of T3, we can see I should have aligned it with this. It is going on here fine up to this, and here it gets the priority of T2, right, goes on up to this, and here it gets the priority of T1, more higher priority, goes on, and then when it completes this VA, it will come back to its old priority. All right. So, if I plot the priority values here, this is the priority value of T1, this is the priority value of T2. All right. So, the priority value here in this diagram, I am merely showing the priority value of T3, how it is changing because of priority inheritance. So, there can be scenarios where this can also raise to deadlock. Okay. Although this one is very nice to see that I can solve the priority inversion problem because of using priority inheritance, but this is also not without side effects. Let us take one example. Let us take this example. I do not know whether it is very visible or not. Visible. So, here what is shown is at time T0, T1 is starting execution. At T1, T1 is locking some critical section. Now, in this example, priority of T2 is higher than that of T1. Let us assume that. If you like, you may take it down. T0 is starting the execution, then T1 at T1, I am sorry, at T0 the task T1 is starting execution, the low priority task, then it is locking on some critical section. At that time the higher priority task is activated and preempts the higher priority. Now, there are two critical sections here. You can see that this T2 is locking this CS1. Let me draw this. I think that will be easier for you to understand. So, initially, now here note that priority of T2 is greater than priority of T1. Okay. So, initially at this is T0, from here T2 starts, all right. At time T1, I am sorry, this T1 has started. Let me redraw it. Priority of T2 is greater than priority of T1. So, this is the timeline. T equal to 0. Initially, task T1 starts execution. normal execution up to time t1, all right. And here it performs P S2. So, there are two critical sections here, P S2, all right, and nothing else has happened. So, this is executing the critical section. Which critical section? S2. On S2 it is working on the resource. So, they are synonymous, all right. Now, at this point T2, higher priority task T2, at time T2, higher priority task T2 starts. Okay. So, it is activated, and obviously, when it is activated, it is preempting the lower priority task T1, agreed. Now, here at this point, at time T3, it asks for P another resource S1. Okay. Now, it performs locks S1. After that, immediately after that, say at T4. So, it locks S1, and let me give some other sign. This is the sign when it is working on S1, all right. And at this point, at T4, it requests S2. Now, what will happen? It requires S2. Now, by priority inheritance, which one will get the priority? Because here it is requesting for the same thing. So, T1 will now get the priority of this. Okay. Now, at T4, therefore, T1 has a lock on it. So, at T5, so it has got made a this one has started executing again. It was doing the critical section. Now, at this point, if it requests for P S1, but is blocked because T2 has already got S2. Now, it is asking for P S1, but that is already. Now, if I already grabbed by T2, now if the priority inheritance also occurs, then this also cannot proceed. Therefore, it is a deadlock situation. So, deadlock is a side effect of priority inheritance protocol that cannot be completely avoided. There is an algorithm called the priority ceiling algorithm, which I will do in the next class before I start moving to some other topic.